We're dining in a fancy restaurant tonight, Eric declared triumphantly, claiming the reservation I had secured for Dad's celebration, much to the surprise of his in-laws. But a single-father household like yours isn't suited for fancy dining, he added, casting doubt on our ability to fit in. Despite his skepticism, I chose to confront Eric with a dose of reality. Do you realize this is my brother's place? I interjected. I'm Elizabeth, a 27-year-old office worker. My parents split when I was young, and Dad raised me single-handedly. Their divorce stemmed from Dad's workaholic nature, leaving Mom feeling neglected and ultimately reaching her breaking point. Tired of waiting, she finally said, "Set me free," tears streaming down her face. Dad, burdened with guilt, admitted fault, blaming himself for relying too heavily on her. Despite their split, Dad always prioritized me, never missing a school event or special occasion. He shielded me from insensitive comments about our single-parent household with his unwavering love. After the divorce, Mom and I maintained sporadic contact, but her remarriage and new family strained our relationship, leading to an awkward estrangement. Dad, on the other hand, took early retirement to focus on enjoying life. He'd sacrificed so much for me, and I wanted him to indulge in his passions. Then, 2 years ago, I married Eric, a man introduced by a friend. Dad approved of him wholeheartedly, and his in-laws welcomed me warmly. But when Eric suggested we move into his family home, I hesitated. Both my parents were aging, and the thought of being far from Dad worried me. He reassured me, insisting he was healthy enough to live independently. "Call me if anything happens," he urged, relinquishing any guilt I felt about leaving him. With his blessing, albeit reluctantly, I agreed to move in with Eric's family, knowing Dad would always be just a phone call away. However, just a few weeks after moving in, I began to regret my decision. Eric and his parents, whom I initially thought were kind, drastically changed their behavior towards me. They began treating me like a servant, assigning all the household chores, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, solely to me, while they did nothing. When I asked Eric for help, his response was dismissive. "I'm tired from work. Housework is a wife's job, right?" My protests about my own workload falling on deaf ears. "You married me, so you should be devoted to me and my parents," Eric would retort. Coming home exhausted from work only to face an endless list of chores was overwhelming. But it wasn't just the chores. Eric's mother, Mary, relentlessly tormented me. She'd purposefully spill food to dirty the floor or complain about the slightest speck of dust. "The spot is dirty, you know," she'd order me to clean. After telling me this, she'd leave dirty clothes all over for me to pick up. And after I washed and carefully folded them, she'd kick them apart. Moreover, Mary often made disparaging remarks about me being from a single-father household. "You can't even do housework properly because you weren't raised in a proper family," she'd say. "How pitiful. It's amazing you can hold a job. The company must be blind to hire such a bottom-rung woman. It's your dad's fault for the way he brought you up." Hearing such insults about Dad made me want to lash out. But the worst part was that John, my father-in-law, and Eric did nothing to intervene while they witnessed Mary's treatment of me. Far from supporting me, John looked at me scornfully, while Eric joined Mary in mocking me. "Mom's right, you lack any gratitude towards us. That's why she's cold to you," Eric sneered. "A woman from a dysfunctional family like yours would have been left on the shelf if I hadn't married you. You barely have any merits besides working and doing housework, so do them well. Don't even think of asking to share the chores. It's your role as a wife. And making excuses like being tired from work is absolutely unacceptable. I won't allow it," he dictated. When I tried to argue or refuse, Eric's mood turned visibly sour, and he began treating me as if I were invisible. "How dare you, as a wife, make a fool of me?" he would shout excessively. Then Mary chimed in, adding to the stress. "Don't stress Eric when he's tired. Making things worse for me," she said. Some of the furniture in the in-laws' house was bought with my money. Coerced into purchasing them, I was abruptly taken to an electronics store and forced to buy under public pressure. Capitulating to avoid a scene, the harassment didn't end there. Even when I tried to visit my family for Christmas, they obstructed me. "You're our wife now. Focus on our preparations. We need a feast and thorough cleaning done. Your dad's all alone? He won't do much, right?" "We have other relatives to entertain," they insisted. When I persisted in going home, they responded childishly, spilling juice on my packed clothes, hiding my shoes, and issuing daily complaints and harassment. Reluctantly, I gave up the idea of going back home, unable to reveal the truth. "The in-laws' house is busy with Christmas preparations, so I'll stay in to help." "Sorry, I can't make it back," I told Dad. Dad didn't blame me. "Then it can't be helped." He gracefully accepted. "Don't worry about it. It's busier there with more people. I can manage fine alone." "So be it," he comforted me. Eric's ongoing tyranny made me seriously contemplate divorce, but I was troubled about how to tell Dad, who was purely happy about my marriage without hurting him. In the second year of this tumultuous marriage, Dad turned 60. I secretly made reservations at a renowned fancy restaurant for his celebration, anticipating complaints from Eric and his parents. I simply told them I had to return home briefly. They grumbled but reluctantly accepted when I promised it would just be for the day. Upon learning about the restaurant reservation, Dad was immensely delighted. "I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter." "Thank you so much." Hearing Dad express gratitude made me incredibly happy. But I never imagined such an incident would unfold. As we entered the restaurant and informed the staff of our reservation, we were met with a shocking revelation: a reservation for two. "There are 3 people claiming to be relatives already seated there," the staff informed us. Confused, I went to see the reserved table, only to find Eric and the in-laws seated there. Eric noticed me, sneering with a smug smile. "Too bad you can't outsmart us and dine fancy just by yourselves," he said. The in-laws didn't even look our way, indulging in the feast they had presumably ordered for themselves. Dad, seeing Eric and the in-laws, looked back and forth between us, clearly bewildered. He had only seen the pleasant side of Eric and the in-laws, so his confusion was understandable. Eric, suspecting something from my cheerful demeanor about returning home, had sneakily snooped through my mobile phone. He learned about the 60th birthday celebration at the upscale restaurant and made it there first to preemptively order dishes. Eric began to mock us with a triumphant expression. "People from poor, single-father households like you don't belong in fancy restaurants. Know your place. Let us savor the dishes here. Be grateful we're allowing you this much. You lot should go to some cheap pub." Despite the other customers' annoyed glances at Eric's loud voice, he remained oblivious, soaked in a sense of superiority. Next to Dad, he was dumbfounded by Eric's audacity. I was at my wits' end. I knew Eric and his family were selfish, but I never expected them to stoop to such shameless levels. My anger peaked as they ruined Dad's special 60th celebration. Suppressing my urge until Eric shouted, I calmly delivered a fact to him as he sat there smugly. "This is my brother's place. He invited us here to celebrate Dad's birthday." At my words, the triumphant Eric and the disinterested in-laws froze. My brother, who had been listening to the entire conversation from the back of the restaurant, appeared with an extremely displeased look. He was taken by Mom during the divorce, but unlike our estranged mom, he has maintained and cherished his relationship with Dad and me. My brother owns the restaurant and was the one who suggested celebrating Dad's 60th birthday here. He hadn't attended the wedding due to work, but had seen the photos, so he recognized Eric. Initially, he thought Eric and the in-laws joining at the reserved table were part of celebrating with Dad. Seeing Eric mocking me and Dad, and the in-laws not correcting him, my brother was furious. "How dare you speak to my sister and Dad like that? I regret being considerate just because you're Emily's family. Is this how you always treat her? I prepared this seat for my sister's wish to celebrate Dad, not for people who hijack it just for a free meal. We will celebrate Dad and my sister's occasion on another day. You'll be paying for what you ate." Eric and his party started making excuses, but my brother left them to the staff and took me and Dad outside. I'm sorry for letting such people into the restaurant and ruining the celebration. I'll make it up to you. He apologized to us. On the way home, I explained to Dad all the mistreatment from Eric and the in-laws. After listening silently, Dad said, "If you're unhappy in your marriage, there's no point. Don't worry about me. Come back home." So, I didn't return to the in-laws' house but went straight to my own home. Shortly after, my brother called to inform me about Eric and the in-laws. They had caused a scene over the bill but reluctantly paid when threatened with police involvement. Minutes later, Eric called. "Where are you? You've embarrassed us. Send the money we paid," he yelled. "Then I won't pay a penny. I'm done with you, and we'll be divorcing. I've gathered evidence of the bullying, so be prepared," I firmly replied. I had been collecting evidence of the harassment from Eric and the in-laws, which they never suspected. According to a lawyer I consulted, the forced purchases and other financial exploitations were enough to prove psychological abuse. Realizing I was serious about divorce, Eric panicked. No one but me would marry a woman from a single-father household. "Do you want to upset Dad?" he threatened. I scoffed. "Dad said my happiness matters most. I'd rather be with him than care for the likes of you," I replied. Still, Eric warned, "You'll regret this. Think it over." But I hung up and proceeded with the divorce preparations. Eventually, Eric and I divorced. He was reluctant due to societal image, but finally gave in as we neared court. I secured substantial evidence of psychological abuse, ensuring I received a fair settlement in the divorce. Additionally, during the property distribution, I took the furniture I had purchased for the in-laws' house, having the legal right as the buyer. The in-laws tried to complain, but my lawyer simply stated the purchaser naturally has the right of possession, leaving them defeated. A few months after returning to my parents' home, Eric reached out wanting to reconcile. Apparently, on the day that triggered our divorce at the restaurant, Eric's boss and colleagues were there for a work celebration. They heard everything he said to me and Dad. Eric's boss, who had struggled growing up in a single-parent home, was disappointed in Eric's disparaging remarks about single-father households. Eric lost his standing and any chance of advancement at work. Moreover, his colleagues had spread the story, and he was now regarded with contempt at work. The problems didn't stop at the company. The in-laws' house became chaotic too. Before our divorce, Eric and the in-laws had offloaded all household chores on me, and post-divorce, the in-laws entrenched in laziness, bickering over who should do the chores. Eric was being pressured by the in-laws to buy new furniture to replace what I took and to contribute more financially. I was wrong, Elizabeth. I took advantage of your kindness too much. I've truly reflected and want to start over. Eric pleaded for reconciliation, but my feelings had cooled significantly. He likely faced more pressure to do chores at the in-laws' house and wanted me back to resume my role as a housekeeper. Perhaps he was also trying to offload some of the financial demands from the in-laws onto me, so I firmly rejected his proposal. No way. I wouldn't get back with you even if you paid me. I can see you changing back and exploiting me again once we're married. I was foolish not to divorce you sooner without worrying about Dad. Then perhaps Dad's 60th wouldn't have been ruined. We're divorced now, strangers. If you contact me again, I'll consult my lawyer." I hung up the phone. Perhaps my mention of a lawyer resonated because I received no further reconciliation attempts from Eric. Now I'm living happily at home with Dad, and my brother occasionally visits, bringing gifts. His wife is pregnant, and he seems truly happy. Dad and I are both looking forward to the baby. While I'm not considering marriage anytime soon, if the opportunity arises, I'll be sure to choose more wisely.